This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
On this week's programme, we quiz the Transport Minister about delayed and cancelled government contracts, and he promises that the Paphos-Polis road will be delivered on time.
In the previous contract, it was supposed to be on the 26th of November. So it was terminated, and now the Public Works Department says that all the process we have to go through will take us about 3 years before we hand over the project to the people. So 3 years from today, I think we should be finished.
And the operations manager of one of the biggest hotel chains in Sweden suggests sustainability options to hoteliers and the tourism industry in Cyprus.
Like, for example, here I came across that it's a big problem with the plastic waste. So that could be immediately started is that water counters could be put up in hotels, and where people don't need to buy plastic bottles. They can come with their own refillable bottles, they can refill the bottles, and at least you don't need to have a big or a small size hotel for that. Anybody can do that, even a restaurant can do that.
We're joined on this week's programme by our Minister for Communications and Transport, Alexis Vafiades. It's a while since we've spoken to him, but I wanted to talk to him today about the Polis to Paphos highway. It's been much in the news. I'm sure he'll be able to tell us when it all started, but now there are problems. Alexis, I know it wasn't you that signed original contracts. This has been going on for years, but you're having to pick up the slack, because I think I'm right in saying that the original contractor is no longer involved. You've got to do a new contract. How far over budget and over time are we on this highway?
Okay, so we will have to start all over again, because the previous contract was terminated, and we need to hire a new contractor to do the job, so we have to go through the process all over again. This is not a very pleasant situation, but it had to be done if we ever wanted to finish with the project, because the previous contractor did not display what would be the expected rate of work. So since that wasn't happening, we had to, by what's provided for in the contract, we had to proceed with the termination because of the delays in the progress of work.
But it's not just the delays, it's also the huge increase in costs. Now, they've gone up several times, I think, while the first contractor was involved. I have to ask you, are we doing something wrong when we draw up contracts for huge projects like this one? Because it does seem to me that almost all the government contracts I read about in the papers are over budget. So something's not being done right somewhere.
Okay, well, government contracts sometimes run into trouble, but many times they are successful in completing the job. So it's not a rule in my understanding that government contracts have issues. What I think is that when we sign a contract, we are very clear on what kind of risks the government, the employer in this case, is willing to take on, and what kind of risks we want the contractor to take on. And risks are always risks, and they might materialize. So when this contractor signed on this job, he did it at a time when the costs were what they were at the time. So I'm just speaking hypothetically now. So in case that due to inflation or whatever, the cost went up, the burden of this cost is allocated according to a specific clause within the contracts. And it says that, okay, up to this amount or calculated by this way, the employer pays for it, but the rest is a cost taken over by the contractor.
Okay, but since this has happened on so many cases, is it really realistic to expect the employer, the government, to share those costs? Why don't you make sure that the original tender takes that into account? I mean, businesses don't usually tender for something that's maybe going to take 4 or 5 years without taking into account the fact that prices go up.
Well, there is this specific clause that accounts for the possibility for inflation to influence the prices. And it says that according to certain conditions, we do pay a certain amount. But it might also be that prices go down. They might go up, they might go down. So
I've never heard, do tell me that I've missed it, of a contractor saying, my prices have dropped, so you don't need to pay as much.
Well, these are not prices that are controlled by the contractor. So the statistical authority, actually the Cyprus statistics monitor the prices, and they designate whether something goes up or down. So there was a case previously during some financial crisis when prices did go down. At that case, there was a reduction in prices. So whatever the case, the contractor knows beforehand what the conditions of the contract are, and they agree to enter the contract with the risks that are involved for them.
So how come so many of them end up coming cap in hand to the government and saying, actually, I can't manage to do it by this time, can I have an extension? And then very often, and can I also have more money because prices have gone up? You do that, you give it to them, and a year later they're back again, cap in hand again, saying the same thing.
Okay, so the contract is very clear on what can be paid as extra to the contractor. There are certain conditions where the contractor rightly can claim for extra money. We want the government to be a fair employer. And if it's fair to be paid, for the contractor to be paid, then we do that. If it's fair for them to get an extension of time, then we do that. But if it's not fair, then we have to draw a line and protect taxpayers' money by not paying people money they don't deserve.
And what about these extensions to time? When I tender for a huge project like Paphos-Polis highway, we know it's going to take years. We also know, don't we, that there's a lot of land in that area that needs either tunnels or bridges or something. It's complicated. How carefully is that assessed when a contractor says, oh, I can do this, I can do that? Because there's now a huge hoo-ha, isn't there, about whether or not we need all those tunnels or we need all those bridges.
Well, actually, this is a design and build contract. So the contractor is responsible to design the project as well, not only build it, they design it as well.
But you have to check that if you're going to give them the money.
Yes, there is a preliminary plan. So we do give them which route they will take and whether they will go through tunnels and stuff like that. That's given. But the design for the whole thing is done by the contractor and not by the government. So they know they have to examine all the conditions in the site and take that into account when they are designing the project. So it doesn't mean that every contractor will do the same design. Each one can do their own design, provided that it's approved by the government.
Would it not be better for the government to make the design with the experts that you have and then ask for tenders to fulfill that specific design? Because hopefully then you have looked at all the possible hiccups that could occur and avoided them.
Well, okay, in this case, the government chose to enter into this particular contract. This particular contract says, okay, the risk that comes with the design, with any other mistakes or wrong assumptions in the design, we don't want to carry that risk. So that risk is passed on to the contractor, who has very capable and qualified engineers who can do the design. And once they finish with the design, the government goes through it, checks it, and says, yes, we can accept this, or no, we have comments on this. So it's part of the allocation of risk again. So it's our experts chose to use this type of contract because they consider that the government should not assume the risk for the design. And this was all known to all parties before they signed. So the contractor cannot claim that he didn't know anything about this contract because he could read it. He knew the contract. He could do any sort of investigation he wanted to. He could change the design if he wanted to, do it differently. So I think this is a fair contract that gives everybody involved enough opportunity to consider all these factors and come up with a design and complete the project within a fixed time limit.
Tell us when that's going to be.
Well, in the previous contract, it was supposed to be on the 26th of November. So it was terminated, and now the Public Works Department says that all the process we have to go through will take us about 3 years before we hand over the project to the people. So 3 years from today, I think we should be finished.
Now let's talk about all the other things that you've had to be involved in. I'm thinking of Larnaca Port.
Yeah.
Again, a similar problem with a plan accepted and then the contractor sort of trying to wriggle out of it.
Okay, that was a different contract. That was a public-private partnership. So we handed them over the area of the port and the marina, and they were supposed to develop it and use the port for a number of years in the marina and develop the land, the real estate, and lease it off and have revenue. Okay, so in that case, it was a different agreement with the contractor, and it seems that the contractor had some sort of reasons why not to proceed. And this ended not because of a delay in time, but because the contractor violated certain very critical terms of the contract. So in that case, it was not a delay in time, it was a violation of the terms of the contract.
It seemed to me when I read the reports in the press, we can't always believe what we read in the press, I know, that in actual fact, the suggestion by the contractor that, well, he could do the port bit later, but let him build the villas and hotels first, sounded a bit fishy to me.
Well, it was, the contractor had some suggestions, okay? He wanted to
do the bits that make money first, and then you had no guarantee that he'd finish the bits that he was supposed to.
Okay, but at the end of the day, we said we would be willing to discuss these things and review them with reference to the contract and decide. But before we did that, they had to comply with a very critical term of the contract, which they refused to do.
Okay, let's come off that and talk about your looking ahead during your tenure at the ministry to things that you can improve apropos of all the things that we've been discussing. Can you make changes that mean we won't fall into these pits again? Okay,
the answer is yes and no. On the yes part, it's we should be learning from our past experiences and trying to adjust things and make sure that next time we do better. Because it might be a failure. Legally, we might be considering this to be a failure on behalf of the contractor, but at the end of the day, it's us who want the project, and we want to do it, and we want to finish it on time. So if things didn't go the way we planned them to go, then we need to review the whole situation and decide, okay, what went wrong? How can we avoid it for next time? So this is what we're doing now. But it also means that we need to be sure that we employ contractors who are in good financial standing and who do really want to finish the project. And perhaps we need to look at what type of guarantees we get to make sure that these projects finish on time.
And maybe you need to look as well at the past history of contractors who have not succeeded in the things that they've done and say, well, you don't bid again.
Well, that's a legal issue. Whether any contractor can participate or not in a project, it depends on their legal standing vis-a-vis the tendering process, and that's not so easy to disqualify a contractor. Even though there is a process, it's not the easiest thing to disqualify them. But it's.
But is it something the government takes into account when it's assessing tenders? You don't need to say to them, well, we don't want you because you messed up last time. But you can just say, well, we've got a better offer.
they need to be disqualified from the process. For anybody, for any committee to disqualify a contractor, we need to go through a different process before that, whereby we disqualify them from participation in the future. Because it's not up to one person or one committee to disqualify anybody. That's not legal. So what we do need to do is try and find ways of streamlining this process, making it not so bureaucratic, perhaps easier to do, so that current experiences are built in within the review process of all contractors.
We've been talking on this week's programme to our Minister for Transport, Alexis Vafiades. Alexis, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
Last week, the Swedish Embassy in Cyprus hosted a sustainable tourism event organised by the Cyprus Sustainable Tourism Initiative. One of the keynote presentations was given by Anish Kanswal, Operational Efficiency Manager at Stockholm's Quality Hotel Strawberry Arena, the largest hotel in Stockholm and part of the biggest hotel chain in the region. He explained the main thrust of his presentation.
The main message that I was trying to give across is that sustainability is not something that you do like just for the fun of it, or like something like it's very important that you do it because it's good for the environment, it's good for the profitability, so it's good for the hotels as well. It's very good for the marketing, so it makes total business sense as well. And I was trying to call more for the business side of people because they were mostly hotel owners and they look for profitability, and I understand that. But what they forget is that achieving the profitability, you can also be better for the environment. So that was the main message I was trying to reinforce, that don't look at sustainability in isolation. Look at it as a complete 3D image, that you are saving the environment, you are saving money, which is good for you, and then you are having a good marketing as well, because in the future, or how Sweden is also now going forward, is that business to business, people only book with the hotels which are sustainable or which have sustainability rating of certain sorts. So if you don't have any sustainability rating in the future, the other businesses will not book with you because that is part of their CSR initiatives.
Now, you work with one of the biggest hotel chains in Sweden, I think, and you went through some of the methodology that people could put in place, which I don't think has to be only in big hotels. It can be scaled down for smaller units, because I don't think we have anything in Cyprus quite on the scale that you were talking about.
Yeah,
but how can people put this into practice?
I think the first thing they should start immediately is training their staff, putting like a culture of sustainability, not just that, okay, this is something we really have to do. Like, it should not be like that. It should be that, okay, this is something we want to do. And that always comes from top to bottom. In our organization as well, back in Sweden as well, it flows from the top of the chain. Because people want to do it, that's why people are doing it. So it has to come from top to bottom. The culture of sustainability has to be there, for which you need to educate your staff. I would go to another extent and I would say that we need to educate our customers and our guests as well. When people are coming in the hotel, they need to understand that why certain practices are followed and how it is helping the environment, what is the impact of things. Like, for example, here I came across that it's a big problem with the plastic waste. So that could be started is that water counters could be put up in hotels, and where people don't need to buy plastic bottles. They can come with their own refillable bottles, they can refill the bottles, and at least you don't need to have a big or a small size hotel for that. Anybody can do that. Even a restaurant can do that if you put up a water counter.
You were also talking, I think, about how to save water more generally, and of course save energy, because electricity bills, maybe in Sweden it's mostly on heating, but in Cyprus it's mostly on air conditioning in the summer, of course. But it's the same thing. It still uses up huge amounts of electricity.
Yes. The thing is that there are different verticals of within sustainability, and they were like 6 or 7 major. But I touched briefly upon, because my time was very limited, so I just touched upon 3. That was energy, food, and water. Energy, because like you said, because wherever you are in the world, whether you are in the hot part or the cold part, in the cold part they are using more for the heating, in the hot part they are using on the cooling, but the principle remains the same. And also it's like so much electricity which is wasted because the lights are on, the chargers are on, people leave their offices, they don't put their lights off. So the small steps, and always the small steps leads to big changes. So we don't need to do something drastically different, but have we done the bare minimum that we are supposed to do? Have we started there? But before we even start something, we need to evaluate, we need to monitor, we need to register what we are doing, where do we stand. So if you want to make progress, first you want to know where you are today.
And you also need to be able to quantify the savings that you've made.
Exactly. And that comes like, because you first you record everything, then you employ your steps that you have done, and then you record it again. So, and then you see the difference, and that gives you the data to drive the process around, because then you have seen that, okay, this actually makes changes, it actually makes sense, it actually saves you money. So absolutely, like, you have to quantify it first.
Food waste is something else, and I know that in Sweden a lot of it is used to make biofuels. Now, we don't do that in Cyprus, but we do have other options. I talked recently to somebody who has orchards where he's encouraging hotels and schools to bring him any food waste they have to feed the chickens that he's using to improve the soil of the orchard. So there's a lot of options.
There are a lot of options, and this is precisely what I was trying to put across today as well, that please do not compare two countries. We should not compare Sweden and Cyprus. We should not try to imply the same things that we are doing in Sweden, in Cyprus, because it's a very different set of societies, I would say. So I think that would be not the right way to start, according to me. I think Cyprus should look into what are the possibilities here. Because, like, for example, in Sweden, we don't make biogas. Like, the company that pick up the food, they send it to a company who makes biogas. So the whole chain is already set. So people have already thought of this for a long time. So that's not something that I have invented, or the people who are working with sustainability, they have invented now. That has been invented like many years ago.
You're just making use of it.
We are just making use of it. We are doing it proper. We are not mixing the trash, and that also we are supposed to do, like, by law. So that's why it's not good to draw parallels between two very completely different countries. I think, like you said, here people can use it for making food for chicken or like those kind of things. You can make fertilizers out of it. You can use the food waste to make soil things. Big hotels can do their own little, like, farming, because I see that they have a lot of land here. Like, the big hotels have like nice gardens and those things. They can use the leftover food and they can make
Compost.
the compost, and they use the compost for making organic, let's say, herbs or some vegetables they want to grow. So of course the possibilities are endless, but the solution is tailor-made to every country. The basic solutions, of course, I think the thought process should be the same, that okay, we want to save. How we save it, it depends on the hotel you are in, what is the size of the hotel, which part of the country you are in, what are the problems that you are facing. That, I think, has to be taken very independently.
After your talk, and when everybody started socializing afterwards, what were the main things that people came up to you and asked you, particularly since there were so many hoteliers there?
Yeah, they were asking about the same, like, the discussion that we are having right now, because they wanted to draw parallels between that. Okay, how do you do this? And like, our hotel is like quite big. It's like 650 rooms, and we have like big conference halls and those things. And I told them the same thing, that please do not do that. Like, you are asking me the questions, I can give you the answers, but it's not going to help you because you are not built that way. Our hotel was built in a way also, like, it's easy to segregate waste, because I was talking to one of the general managers of the hotel. They say that the waste segregation doesn't work here. Or if you sort the waste, and for you to make the municipality pick up the waste, you have to pay. This is what I understood. Maybe I understood wrong, but this is what I understood. So it's very different. But they were quite intrigued with the practices that we are following. And I kept on, because I don't want to demoralize them. Because if people think that, okay, this is a very huge job, then nobody will start doing it. So I was trying to tell them, take small steps, try to educate your staff, put the water counter, try to use your food as much as you can, try to stop using harmful chemicals if you are using any harmful chemicals in your building. So the small changes if you can make, because I briefly touched upon how to use chemicals correctly, how when you are cleaning your towels and linens in the hotel room, how much par stock do you have. So we were talking about like more things, and I tried to plug them also with the productivity side of it, the KPIs. In our profession we call it KPIs, it's key performance indicators. So when you plug those things in with all the things that you are doing, then it gives you a more better picture or a holistic picture of what are we really doing.
And it gives you, I guess, sustainability as well as profitability.
Yes, absolutely. And that is the key. I think when people start to see sustainability more as a profitability tool, then I think there will be a switch that will happen. Because again, that's the way I wanted to pitch, because that gives you more eyeballs, or that gives you more ear, because that's why people were listening very keenly when I showed them the comparison that, okay, this much electricity we have saved, and we saved these many million crowns, or like something like that. So then everybody gave their attention that, okay, this is related to profitability. So maybe the motto here should be sustainability equals to profitability. So if we emphasize that, and once the ball is rolling, then it's fine. Then sustainability can take the front seat. But as long as people are becoming sustainable, I don't mind if profitability take the front seat. It doesn't matter.
Anish Kanswal, Operational Efficiency Manager at the Quality Hotel Strawberry Arena in Stockholm. That's the largest hotel in the capital of Sweden and part of the biggest hotel chain in the region.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
And in other news, the Bendakomo waste management plant was back in the headlines this week. Regular listeners will recall that we've documented the myriad failures of the plant since it started operating in 2017, and it now looks like it will be another 5 years before it starts functioning as planned. Earlier this week, the Agriculture Minister, who's also responsible for the environment portfolio, said that works at both Bendakomo and the other waste management plant at Koshi will begin in the first quarter of 2028, with final delivery scheduled for 2029. There's speculation, too, about the minister's instructions in an internal memo to all personnel at her ministry to go through her press office when speaking to the media. The Journalists' Union has reacted rather angrily, saying that this goes back to the days of non-transparency. The memo stated that no employee of the Ministry of Agriculture shall make comments to the media without the minister's prior approval. It also said that any replies to the media would be given in writing only. Grigoris Sava, press officer with the Agriculture Ministry, told local press that the ministry was trying to actually do the opposite of how the incident had been portrayed. In fact, he said, the ministry wants to enhance coordination among the various departments to improve interaction with the media. He added that it's not about control of information.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
The biggest achievement of Crime Stoppers has been the ability of the public to be able to give information about crime anonymously.
There's no way I could have kept prostituting without the drugs. There's no way I could have had my body used like a public toilet, because that's actually what prostitution is.
And then the fourth series I started 3 days after I'd won the Oscar, so the whole of the Monarch of the Glen experience was all interplatted with the Gosford Park Oscar experience.
I was working with Ronnie James Dio, and David was going to reform Whitesnake in 2003.
Cyprus was chosen because Cyprus is a stable, peaceful and secure place.
We have to really look closely. What are we doing with children? What are we doing with adolescents? And what are we doing with adults that can help them move into a more literate situation?
The ones that I'm proudest of are the ones that were true discoveries, where we found something we didn't know existed.
And finally, an earthquake was felt on Wednesday morning in parts of the island. It measured 5 on the Richter scale, and it originated in the sea between Cyprus and Turkey just after 11 in the morning. It shook the southern coast of Turkey, and in Cyprus was mostly felt in Nicosia, Paphos, Kyrenia and Limassol. No injuries or damage were reported. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.